one of my teachers in Morocco when I shared with him how amazing it was that I'd become a Muslim and how life had changed to me so much. He said, let me warn you now. And I thought he was going to say, take care when you fall back or when you have difficulties that overwhelm you, and so forth, which is also okay. That's good. But we can talk about that in another video. But he didn't say, warning me about falling down or not being so good. He said, you haven't seen anything yet. And I'll say that to all of you. If you take the path and you recognize Allah's rahmah and His kareem, His generosity and His fadl, the overflow of the nature of His reality, you haven't seen anything yet, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. I would like to talk about something. Just the last couple of days, I've gone out with my son first thing in the morning, and that is after I change him and dress him and all that, because it's getting warmer. And as it gets warmer, as spring comes in, probably depending on where you are in the country or in the world, as far as that goes, you may not have green yet. We're seeing the first signs of green and the smell of the earth as it begins to call down the rain, and spring, the vitality and the quality of the bakhor, the scent of spring starts to come alive on the earth and in the trees and so forth. What I want to say is that when I take him out at first thing in the morning, which I recommend, to get the first light of day through the eyes, which affects the entire body. There was a man many years ago that I became familiar with his work. His name was John Ott. And he did some amazing research on light and the effect it has on the body and being. And he worked for Walt Disney, and he's the one who developed the time-lapse photography, which is so common nowadays, and by which we were able to see the miracles and the awesome qualities of the seed sprouting and turning into plant growing through the ground and so forth, and many other things with that time-lapse principle. He was never recognized as he could have been for the work and the studies he did, maybe because he was an employee of Walt Disney and was kind of not recognized as a real real scientific man. But some of the research he did was amazing. One of the things that just amazes me, so interesting, and I think his work and his book at least deserves more attention than it's gotten, especially when we get people nowadays, neurologists and scientists who talk about how when you're amongst green and greenery, because of that green, we get a greater reflection of the really valuable near red, near the infinite, the red spectrum, infrared, near infrared, that goes deep into our system and affects so many things, even down to the bones and the organs. When we're in a green environment, and there's lots of green, when the sunlight, which has infrared in it, of course, hits the green reflects that off, so that if we're amongst green trees and around green trees, we'll get probably 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3 times greater amount of those infrared rays. The kind of rays we used to get if we were sat around a campfire, to be honest, interestingly. But John Ott, one of the many things, he did a lot of work with people in which he had them stop wearing dark glasses and their arthritis would get better. Now, the modern neurologists are beginning to get on of it. One of the neurologists that I like very much, who's also an ophthalmologist, who says that the eyes are unlike any other part of our body. And he said it's more like the brain pushing out through the holes in our skull. And from the things I've learned and studied around light, having been an artist and painter in the past and very concerned with color um, and light, that's a pretty remarkable kind of thing. So John Ott, in one of his studies, he took a classroom with young students who were in the back row and very restless and moving around, very difficult doing their work. ADHD, poor focus, whatever you want to call it. And he changed the light from fluorescent light to incandescent light, which is more like the campfire or what we find in the sunlight. And the study that he did when he changed that, the films from these studies are available. It's really interesting. Those students who were very dissociated and out of focus, they moved to the front rows and began doing their work more. Now that's a remarkable thing. And he did lots of other things that were quite remarkable. But again, it's so often the case that the para-scientific people, the people that are outside of the norm of the scientific community or the academic scientific community with their formats and their references and citations and all the formats that's needed or expected of them. A lot of those people come up with amazing discoveries, many of which don't find their way into the mainstream for years, decades. Someone once wrote a book about that and saying that most of the really valuable studies that change the whole sort of understanding, it takes something like 15 years on the average to find its way into the mainstream. The other one that's remarkable is what they call the electromagnetic remineralization of the teeth. I remember that was at least 10 years ago, or maybe more, that I read about that in a journal. And then I haven't heard of it ever since. And I thought, and there were, at the time, there were two companies that were going to produce the minerals that would be needed to support and work with those electromagnetic integration of the calcium and so forth. And I thought it would be a big thing, but I don't know, maybe the dentist industry, I don't know, it's conspiracy stuff. But it's not happened, and I've yet to meet a dentist that's even familiar with that research and the things that could be done there. So John Ott was an amazing person, but I will say this, that in the recent studies and the recent even books that have come out about being in the greenery and how that reflects the infrared, so that we're with a green environment, we get more of it. As we get to the end of Ramadan, some of you will be in a place where you're already and have access to greenery. At the moment, we're just at the beginning here. But we can still, with the warmer weather, we can still get the early morning light, and we can remember and become aware that the light that goes through in our eyes, that part of our brain that's pushing out through those holes in our skull, that through our eyes, all sorts of things can happen in our body, the joints, the metabolism, etc., etc. And basically the very way we feel, importantly. So may this Ramadan be more than you can imagine for you. And, the Hadith Qudsi in which Allah says that I am in the expectations of my servant, something to that effect. Expect the best and expect more than you can imagine. One of my teachers in Morocco, when I shared with him how amazing it was that I'd become a Muslim and how life had changed to me so much, he said, let me warn you now. And I thought he was going to say, take care when you fall back or when you have difficulties that overwhelm you and so forth, which is also okay. That's good. But we can talk about that in another video. But he didn't say, warning me about falling down or not being so good. He said, you haven't seen anything yet. And I'll say that to all of you. If you take the path and you recognize Allah's rahmah and His kareem, His generosity and His fadl, the overflow of the nature of His reality, you haven't seen anything yet, inshallah. All right. Assalamu alaikum.